My phone buzzed against the kitchen counter at 4:37 in the afternoon, 3 days before Thanksgiving, and I knew before I looked at it that it was going to ruin something. I just didn't know yet that the thing it was going to ruin was already broken, and had been broken for almost a year, and I'd just been too tired to notice. It was my mother. Family dinner Thursday. 5 p.m. sharp. Don't be late this time. Bring a pie. The pumpkin one, not the apple. Your father doesn't like the apple. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time, because I was waiting for the part where she asked how my son was doing. He turned 7 in August, and she hadn't called. He'd had pneumonia in October, 3 nights in the hospital, and she'd texted me a single word. Okay. Like she was acknowledging a receipt. My son's name is Lyndon. He's small for his age, soft-spoken, and he has a way of folding his hands in his lap when he's nervous that I've never been able to break him of. He learned it from his father, I think. His father has been dead for 14 months. A drunk driver on Route 9, 2 miles from our house, 2 days before Lyndon's 6th birthday. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because if you don't know that, none of the rest of this makes sense. My husband's name was Caleb. He was an electrical lineman. He worked storms. He had a life insurance policy through his union, and another one his father had taken out on him when he was 19 and added me to as the sole beneficiary after we got married. Together they came to a number I'm not going to say out loud, because the moment I said it out loud was the moment everything in my family started to rot. I made the mistake exactly one time. It was March. I was at my parents' house picking up a casserole dish my mother had been holding hostage for 2 months, and my older sister was there, and she asked me, very casually, the way she asks anything she's been planning to ask for weeks, how I was doing with money. And I was tired, and I was lonely, and I said, I'm okay. The insurance came through. Lyndon's college is covered. The mortgage is covered. I'm okay. My sister's name is Whitley. She's 4 years older than me. She has a husband who sells industrial flooring and 2 daughters in private school. And she has been, my entire life, the daughter my parents actually wanted. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it the way you'd say it's raining. It's just the weather. By April, I started getting phone calls. My father, who hadn't called me in 8 months, suddenly wanted to take me to lunch. My mother started asking about my situation. My sister sent me an article about how widows often make poor financial decisions in the first 2 years and need trusted family advisors. She sent it from her phone at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I was sitting on Lyndon's bedroom floor watching him sleep, because I'd been doing that almost every night since his father died, and the buzz of my phone made him stir. I ignored the article. I ignored the lunches. I told myself I was imagining it. Then in July, my mother called and asked if I'd thought about Lyndon's future stability. She used those exact words. She said she and my father had been talking, and they thought it would be wise to put some of the insurance money into a family trust that they would oversee, for Lyndon's benefit, of course. She said my sister had agreed to be co-trustee. She said it would protect me from predatory people. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't think about it. I just stopped answering her calls for 2 months. In September, my father showed up at my house. Unannounced. He sat at my kitchen table and told me that the family had been patient with my grief, but that it was time to start acting like an adult. He said that Caleb would have wanted his money to be managed properly. He said my sister had spoken to a financial advisor who had drawn up some preliminary paperwork. He said all I had to do was sign. I asked him to leave. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. He said, "You're going to regret this, sweetheart." He called me sweetheart maybe 3 times in my entire adult life, and every time it meant something bad was about to happen. So when my mother's text came in 3 days before Thanksgiving and didn't ask about Lyndon, I should have known. I really should have. But the thing about grief is that it makes you stupid in a very specific way. It makes you want to go home. Even when home is the place that hurts you. Especially then. I texted back, "We'll be there." The pie came out of the oven a little dark on the edges. Lyndon helped me crimp the crust. He pressed his small thumb into the dough all the way around the pan, and his thumbprint stayed there through the baking, soft and uneven and perfect. I almost cried at the sink. I don't know why. He wore a clip-on tie, navy blue. He picked it out himself at Target 2 weeks earlier because he saw a man wearing one at church and decided that was what grown men did. He was 7 years old and he wanted to look like a grown man, and watching him try to clip it to his collar in the rearview mirror as I drove broke something small in me that hadn't been broken yet. We pulled into my parents' driveway at 4:58. My sister's SUV was there. My uncle's pickup was there. There was another car I didn't recognize, a black sedan with a paper dealer tag in the window, and I'd find out later who that belonged to. I wish I'd turned around. I wish I'd seen that car and just turned around. But I didn't. I parked. I took Lyndon's hand. I carried the pie. My grandmother answered the door. I should tell you about my grandmother. Her name is Rosalind. She's 78 years old. She raised me almost as much as my mother did because my mother worked late and my father traveled, and my grandmother lived 3 blocks away in the same house she'd lived in since 1971. She made me grilled cheese on Wonder Bread with the crust cut off. She taught me to play gin rummy. She came to Lyndon's school play last spring and sat in the front row and cried during the part where he had 2 lines as a tree. She opened the door and her eyes went straight to Lyndon, and she crouched down, slowly, the way she has to crouch now, and she said, "There's my handsome man. Did you bring your old grandma a hug?" And he buried his face in her shoulder and held on for a long time. And she looked up at me, just for a second, and there was something in her face I didn't recognize. Steady. Watching. Like she'd been waiting for me. I should have read that look. I didn't. The dinner was set up in my parents' dining room, the formal one they only use twice a year, 12 people. My parents at the heads of the table, my sister and her husband on one side with their 2 daughters, my uncle and aunt across from them, my cousin Brett, who I'd barely spoken to in 5 years, and at the far end, 2 seats had been left empty for Lyndon and me. Next to me, my grandmother. Next to my grandmother, an empty chair, and then a man I'd never seen before in a charcoal suit. He had a leather folder in front of him on the table where his plate should have been. I didn't sit down right away. I said, "Mom, who's this?" My mother smiled the way she smiles in Christmas cards. "That's Mr. Halverson. He's a friend of the family. He's here to help us with something after dinner." I looked at my sister. My sister was already looking at me. She had that small triumphant smile I've known since I was 4 years old, the one she wore when she'd hidden my Barbie and was watching me look for it. I sat down. I sat Lyndon down next to me. I told myself I was overreacting. I'd been telling myself that for 9 months. The first 30 minutes were almost normal. My uncle talked about a deer he didn't shoot. My aunt asked Lyndon about school. Lyndon answered politely, in full sentences, and ate his green beans even though he hates them. Because he is a small boy who is trying very hard to be good in a room full of adults who feel dangerous to him. He doesn't have words for it. But he knew. Children always know. Then my father set down his fork. He said, "So, while we're all here, there's something we need to discuss as a family." Lyndon looked up at me. I put my hand on his knee under the table. My father said, "Mr. Halverson is an attorney. Your mother and I have asked him to draw up some documents that will allow us, as a family, to make sure that the resources from Caleb's passing are handled responsibly. For your son's future. For everyone's peace of mind." I said, "Dad, not here. Not in front of Lyndon." My sister said, "Oh, please. He's old enough to understand that his mother is being selfish." There it is. There's the moment. If I close my eyes, I can still see her face when she said it. The little half smirk. The way she didn't even look at Lyndon when she said it. Like he wasn't a person. Like he was just an obstacle she was clearing. My mother said, "Whitley, don't say it like that." But she didn't say don't say it. She just said don't say it like that. I said, very quietly, "I'm not signing anything." My father stood up. My father is a tall man and he uses it. He said, "You will sign, or you will leave my house. And you can take that ungrateful little boy with you. We have been more than patient." The room went quiet. I looked at my mother. I waited. I gave her every second I could give her. I have replayed that moment so many times. 3 full seconds, maybe 4. Long enough for her to say his name. Long enough for her to say he's a child. Long enough for her to say anything. She picked up her water glass. She took a sip. She set it down. And my sister whose daughters I had babysat for free, my sister who I drove to the emergency room at 3 in the morning when she had her appendix out, my sister said, "You should leave. Honestly. And don't come back. Thanksgiving is better without you anyway. It's been better every year you didn't show up." Lyndon made a sound. It wasn't a cry, it was smaller than that. It was the sound a small animal makes when it understands something it shouldn't have to understand. I felt my grandmother's hand close over mine. She didn't squeeze it, she just held it. I stood up. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I have learned in the last 14 months that there is a kind of calm that arrives when something inside you finishes breaking, and I felt that calm settle over me like a coat. I said, "Lyndon, baby, get your coat." He stood up. He folded his hands in his lap the way his father used to, and then he remembered he was standing, and he put them at his sides. He didn't cry, he just looked at the floor. I said, "Mom, Dad, Whitley, I want you to remember this exact moment. I want you to remember what you just said in front of a 7-year-old child who lost his father a year ago. I want you to remember the date and the time. Because you are not going to be allowed to forget it." My father said, "Spare us the drama, go." I picked up Lyndon's coat. I picked up my purse. I started to walk around the table. And my grandmother stood up. She is 78 years old. She had to put both hands on the table to do it. But she stood up. She said, "Sit down, Lyndon. Sit down, sweetheart, both of you. You're not going anywhere." My father said, "Mother, stay out of this." She turned and looked at him. I have never, in my entire life, seen my grandmother look at my father the way she looked at him in that moment. It was not anger. Anger would have been easier. It was something colder. It was the look of a woman who had been waiting, patiently, for a very long time, to say what she was about to say. She said, "This is my house, Gregory." The room went still. My father said, "What?" She said, "This house. This house. This dining room. This table. The chair you're sitting in. They are mine. They have been mine since your father died in 1998. You and your wife have been welcome here for 26 years on my generosity, which I am informing you, as of this moment, has run out." My mother said, "Rosalind, please." My grandmother said, "I'm not finished." She reached down to the floor beside her chair, and she lifted up a manila envelope I hadn't seen, and she set it on the table next to her plate. She opened it. She pulled out a thin stack of papers. She said, "Mr. Halverson, I'm sorry you had to come out here for this, but since you're an attorney, I would appreciate your professional witness for what I am about to say." The man in the charcoal suit went very still. My grandmother said, "Since April of this year, I have been receiving emails. They were forwarded to me by a young woman who used to work at the financial planning office, where my son and my granddaughter Whitley were having conversations about my other granddaughter. That young woman's name is in this folder. So is every email, including the one in which my son refers to his grieving daughter as, and I am quoting, an emotionally unstable woman sitting on a payout she didn't earn. Including the one in which Whitley proposes a percentage split, including the one in which the proposed split designates 40% to herself, 30% to my son and his wife, 20% into a trust they would control, and 10% to be returned to my granddaughter for groceries. That word is in quotation marks in the email. I assume it was a joke. Nobody at the table moved, she said. I have also, in this folder, a letter from my attorney confirming that as of October the 8th this year, I have revised my own will. The house, my savings, the land in Vermont, and the entirety of my estate will pass, upon my death, to my granddaughter and her son. No one else at this table will receive $1. No one else at this table will receive a teaspoon. My mother made a noise. My grandmother said, "I'd like you all to leave now." My father said, "You can't be serious." My grandmother said, "Gregory, you told a 7-year-old child in my dining room that he was ungrateful. You sat in my chair and you told my great-grandson to get out. So I am telling you to get out. So I am telling you to get out. Take your wife. Take your daughter. Take her husband and her children and your brother and his wife and your nephew and the attorney you brought into my house without my permission and get out of my home." My sister stood up. She was shaking. She said, "You can't do this. You can't just rewrite." My grandmother said, "I already did. 3 weeks ago, while you were emailing your father about her grocery money. My father was the first one out the door. He didn't take his coat." My mother stood in the entryway for almost a full minute, holding her purse and looking at me like she was waiting for me to fix it. I didn't fix it. I just held my son's hand, and I looked back at her, and after a long time she walked past me without saying anything, and I heard their car start in the driveway. My sister was harder. She tried 3 different approaches in 5 minutes. First she yelled, then she cried. Then, when she realized neither was working, she came over to where Lyndon was sitting on the couch, and she crouched down, and she said, "Sweetie, you know your aunt loves you, right? You know none of this was about you?" And my son, my soft-spoken, hand-folding, 7-year-old son, looked at her, and he said very quietly, "You said Thanksgiving is better without us." "I heard you." She stood up. She didn't say anything else. She left. The attorney, Mr. Halverson, packed up his folder with hands that were trembling a little. On his way out, he stopped at the door and he looked at my grandmother, and he said, "Mom, I want you to know that I had no idea about the contents of those emails when I agreed to come tonight. I was told this was a family financial planning matter." My grandmother said, "I believe you. Drive safely." He left. The dining room was a disaster. 12 plates, half-eaten food, the pie I'd brought sitting untouched on the sideboard, with Lyndon's thumbprints still pressed into the crust. My grandmother sat back down. She let out a long breath. She looked, for the first time all evening, like a 78-year-old woman. She said, "I'm sorry it had to happen that way." I said, "Grandma, how long?" She said, "Since April. The young woman at the planning office is the daughter of a friend of mine from church. She recognized your father's name. She felt sick about what she was reading. She came to me." I said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She looked at me. She said, "Because if I had told you in April, you would have confronted them. And they would have lied. And you would have wanted to believe them because they're your parents. And grief makes us want to believe our parents. I needed them to do it in front of you. I needed you to hear it. I needed you to never for the rest of your life be able to wonder if you had read them wrong." She reached for Lyndon. He went to her. She held him for a long time. She said against the top of his head, "Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had to hear all of that." I tried to make it as fast as I could. He said, "Grandma, are we going to be okay?" She said, "Yes. We are going to be more than okay. I'm going to tell you what happened in the next 6 months, because I know that if I were watching this, I would want to know. I would want the kind of ending that closes the door." My father called the next morning. I didn't answer. He called 14 times that week. He left voicemails. The first one was angry. The fourth one was apologetic. The 8th one was crying. The 14th one was angry again. I deleted all of them without listening past the first 3 seconds. My mother sent a long letter. Handwritten. 6 pages. She said I had misunderstood. She said my father was hurting too. She said grief had made all of us act out of character. She said the family needed to come together. She did not, in 6 pages, mention Lyndon's name once. Not once. I put the letter in a drawer. I haven't read it again. My sister tried something I didn't expect. She called Child Protective Services on me. She told them I was emotionally unstable, that I was isolating my son from his extended family, that I had been behaving erratically since my husband's death. A caseworker came to my house in early December. She was a kind woman named Ms. Okafor. She spent 40 minutes with Lyndon in his bedroom, looking at his Lego collection and his books. And she came out and she sat with me at the kitchen table, and she said, "Mom, I have to follow up on every report we receive. But I want you to know, off the record, that your son is one of the most well-adjusted 7-year-olds I have met in this job, and I have been doing this job for 19 years. Whoever called us is not someone you need in your life." She closed the case. She also, I learned later from a lawyer I hired the following week, was required to file documentation of a knowingly false report. My sister got a letter from the county in February. I don't know what it said. I don't really care. The lawyer I hired was a woman named Ms. DeWitt. She was 61 years old, and the first thing she said to me after reading the emails my grandmother had forwarded was, "Honey, we are going to make sure these people never come near you again." We pursued a charge of attempted financial exploitation. The emails were very, very specific. My father had used company email for some of them, which turned out to matter a lot because the financial planning firm where my sister had been working with an advisor was bound by federal compliance regulations. And the advisor, when he saw what we had, cooperated immediately. My father lost his job at his consulting firm in March. My sister was disbarred from working in any fiduciary capacity in our state. Her husband left her in April. I'm told he kept the house and the older daughter. I don't know the details and I haven't asked. In May, my grandmother asked Lyndon and me to move in with her. She said the house was too big for one person, and she didn't want to spend the years she had left rattling around in it alone. We sold our old place. The mortgage was already paid off by the insurance. So the sale just went into Lyndon's college fund, and a savings account I will not be telling anyone else about, ever, for the rest of my life. That was the one lesson I learned that I want to pass on, in case it's useful to anyone listening. Do not tell your family how much money you have, not your parents, not your siblings, not your cousins, not anyone. The people who love you don't need to know, and the people who need to know don't love you. I wish I had understood that a year earlier. I wish someone had told me at the funeral. I would have listened. Lyndon is almost 8 now. He still folds his hands in his lap when he's nervous, but he does it less. He has a friend named Theo at his new school, and a goldfish named Captain. And a bedroom with a window that looks out at my grandmother's apple tree. She's teaching him gin rummy. He cheats, she lets him. He hasn't asked about his grandparents. I keep waiting for him to. Some nights I sit on the edge of his bed, and I rehearse, in my head, what I'm going to say when he does. I haven't settled on the words yet, but I know the shape of them. I know I'm going to tell him that some people will say they love you and mean something else by it. I know I'm going to tell him that the people who actually love you will stand up at a dinner table when they are 78 years old and tell a room full of adults to get out of their house. I know I'm going to tell him that family is a verb, not a noun. You do it, you don't just have it. Last week, he asked me if we could invite Grandma Rosalind to come watch his school play. He's got 2 lines this year. He plays a farmer. I said, "Baby, of course." She wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. He nodded. He folded his hands in his lap. Then he caught himself, and he unfolded them, and he put them on the table, and he picked up his fork, and he kept eating his dinner. That was the moment I knew we were going to be okay. Not the dinner, not the lawyer, not the will. That. I think about that Thanksgiving dinner almost every week, and not the way you'd expect. I don't replay the cruel part. I replay the 3 seconds I gave my mother to say my son's name. 3 seconds is a long time when you're waiting for someone to choose you. Long enough to understand that she already had, years ago, and the answer wasn't going to be different this time, just because Lyndon was sitting next to me in a clip-on tie. What I learned is that people don't suddenly become who they are at a dinner table. They've been practicing for decades, in small, private ways, and the dinner table is just where the rehearsal finally goes public. My father didn't lose his temper that night. He revealed it. My sister didn't say something she regretted. She said something she'd written in email in April. Cause and effect doesn't always look like cause and effect in real time. Sometimes, the cause is a sentence you said 2 years earlier. The insurance came through, I'm okay. And the effect doesn't arrive until someone you loved sits in your grandmother's chair and calls your child ungrateful. The hardest thing I had to accept is that being a good daughter and being a good mother were, at a certain point, two different jobs, and I could only hold one of them. I chose the one that was still alive. I chose the 7-year-old in the navy tie, and the moment I chose him, every door in my old life that needed to close, closed on its own. I didn't have to slam them. They just shut. If there's something I want to leave with whoever is listening to this, it's that intelligence in a situation like mine doesn't look like cleverness. It doesn't look like a perfect comeback at the dinner table. It looks like keeping your mouth shut about money for the rest of your life. It looks like noticing, in April, that the lunch invitations don't feel right, and trusting that small wrong feeling even when you can't prove it yet. My grandmother was the smartest person at that table because she waited. She let them write the emails. She let them book the attorney. She let them say it out loud in front of a child, because she knew I would spend the rest of my life questioning what I heard if I didn't hear it like that. And strength, real strength, wasn't standing up at the table. It was standing up the next morning, and the morning after that, and answering the door for the caseworker my own sister had sent, and not breaking in front of her. It was tucking Lyndon into bed every night and not poisoning him against the people who hurt him, because he gets to decide for himself someday what those people were. The people who actually love you don't need a percentage. They just need a seat at the table you build later. I built one. My grandmother is in it. My son is in it. Everyone else is welcome to read about it from outside.